it's okay, I will start. Thank you all for participating today, and I wish to thank a lot Professor Akio Tsukimoto for giving us this introduction for today, and greeting our colleagues from Korea. I do hope for more peace in our world as much as possible. And let me speak a little bit about the Hittites, who really knew how to make peace. But that's a different story. It's not part of our topic today. So I will start reading, and then I will share later on just a few texts. Since the time when we fixed the theme of today's workshop, and until I sat down to bring my thoughts together, I have been working mainly on political rituals and did not deal so much with the topic of today. So I wish to ask for your consideration that my presentation will be a work in progress, actually, rather than a conclusive paper. The issue of physical purification in rituals in the ancient Near East and in the biblical text has been of scholarly interest for a long time. David Wright in 1987 presented a detailed discussion on the disposal of impurity as practiced by the Hittites and in the Hebrew Bible, and the effect it had on both societies in light of their approach to purity. Wright situated impurity as the opposite of the demand for purity in the rituals. He discussed in detail the activities that preceded and followed rituals. However, there is still a difficulty in distinguishing between something that is just clean and something which is pure, especially in a cultic context. My aim today is to try and understand in regards to both the Hittites and the ancient Israelites, what were their means of reaching purity, and in what contexts regarding the cultic ritual did they use those means? And more specifically, what is the place of actions such as washing the body, washing the clothes, just changing the clothing, as well as their relation to becoming pure? The main difficulty that faces such a study is that all of our knowledge derives from texts. It is necessary to note that the rituals of the Hebrew Bible and the Hittites come to us through textual descriptions and were under literary construction and probably went through scribal editing. Therefore, they did not always include all detailed actions of the rituals. Probably there were some details that seemed trivial for them and were never mentioned. So what we are left to work with are the specific ritual activities that are indicated in the texts. What we have in hand is either texts that are narratives describing activities of people becoming pure, or, and this is the most frequent cases, at least in Hittite case, instructive legal texts that command and coerce certain activities and thus prohibit others. Most time, there is no explanation of why a specific act is performed. I will suggest, through briefly examining the Hittite and biblical rituals, looking at the idea of purity as a symbolic act, pre-conducted or post-conducted in several stages, which create a border that has to be crossed in and out when approaching the divine sphere, rather than just cleanliness or washing away dirt. Additionally, it is suggested that the context of these rituals in the cultic sphere essentially relates to the group of workers attached to the temples including specifically the priesthood and those who directly tend to the gods. It is important to note here that the status of purity is not necessarily equal to the status of holiness. In order to reach the status of holiness, one has to be washed and become pure, but the holiness is achieved through contact with holiness. That is, in all cases, the divine presence. To quote Sarah Yafet regarding what is holiness in the Hebrew Bible, and I quote, "Holiness is an attribute of the deity. Hence, whatever belongs to him is sacred. Also, those who come in direct contact with his holiness can be considered holy. However, once they are far away from the deity," and I ended my quote, sorry, "and are not in its dwelling place, their holiness ceases. In order to renew the status of holiness, human beings have to create the needed actions that will transform them into holy state. In order to be able to enter the state of holiness, there is always the need to go through the state of purity. Therefore, the act of purification is not only for cleansing from the dirt, but rather the starting point for arriving at the state of holiness. Thus, the terminology in Hebrew, tahor versus kadosh, holy, should be considered carefully. The purifying agents are as follows. Water is the most common purifying agent and can be used in numerous ways: immersion, ablution, sprinkling, and washing of clothes. Fire is a radical method for purification, as it extinguishes and consumes everything. Other agents are smoke, incense, salt, garlic, eggs, and more. In specific rituals among the Israelites and the Hittites, blood and oil can be used for purification as well. Turning now to the terminology in Hebrew and Hittite, the Hebrew Bible uses specific terms for indicating impurity, tameh, tum'ah, with its opposite being purity, tahor, tohora. These words are also used to indicate a state of difficulty in the life of the individual as well as the community. By using the word difficulty, I would point to different cases of need for cultic rituals to confront impurity in order to get to purity. Hebrew also has the use of the term naki for the meaning clean, and in legal context, it is used in the meaning of not guilty. Next to these terms, there are the words chet and asham, indicating the idea of sin that stands in the opposite of naki. The Hittite terms for sin is washtul, and while papratar stands for dirty and defiled and polluted. The term for pure is actually the word for clean, parkui, and the word shupi stands for sacred or consecrated, and in some contexts also we use it to translate as holy. Some scholars use the translation of ritually pure for this word, since the context is ritual. All these terms are used in rituals as well as legal contexts, which don't always are applied for rituals. The biblical text also use the words rachatz for washing, and usually with water, and then we have kibes or lechabes to wash clothes, shataf to rinse, and then we have taval to immerse, and such to anoint. All these are in same contexts of rituals. The Hittite word for wash is usually arai, to ara, and then to bathe is more of warp, although we can translate it just as washing. So time-wise, okay. Hebrew Bible kabas, for the most part, means the washing of garments to make them clean. The washing of garments is intended to remove various kinds of uncleanliness, primarily uncleanness such as blood from sin offering, or a disease spot, or a spot of semen, or any touch of the skin into that garment. Secondary uncleanliness, the garments of someone else that touched something that is not that is unclean. The clothes of the Levites are washed during their consecration in Numbers 8, but the source of the uncleanliness is not specified. To my understanding, since this ritual is done for their inauguration, it prepares them for their status of temple workers, and this is important for me. Thus, clothes, bgadim, in Hebrew, are a very important part of the purification, as they reflect the status of the person in need of purity. The idea of special clothing for rituals is connected directly with the concept of washing in order to determine ritual appearance. Ritual appearance determines the status of the person conducting the ritual. Catherine Bell, in her volume from 1997 entitled Ritual Perspectives and Dimensions, suggested to look at the need for purity as part of rites of afflictions or suffering. To quote her, beginning of quote, rituals of affliction attempt to rectify a state of affairs that has been disturbed or disordered. They heal, exercise, protect, purify. End of quote. She also adds, quote, a culture might diagnose it as the ravages of sin and prescribe confession and rigorous penance. End of quote. In the case of a crisis, the ancient Israelites and the Hittites believed that it was brought on them by a sin resulting from pollution, unholiness, illness, and more. As such, these rites' purpose was to mitigate the influence of negative forces and conditions such as demonic spirits, sins, and impurity. In these cases, the rites for getting rid of the evil forces are to wash them away, thus cleanse them. However, the cleansing is more of a symbolic act rather than real one. The rituals of purity create a sense of group unity to achieve a certain goal in general, or a goal connectivity with the divine, particularly when considering the context of priesthood. The biblical text of the priestly rules regarding the status of purity describe a procedure for reaching purity in which the act of washing is the starting point, while the main concept of reaching purity is separation from the regular social activity by entering a specific space. As for the action of bathing, as it is described in the priestly ritual of the Hebrew Bible, it is not always possible to determine whether it is for washing away impurity or washing away holiness, such as the activity of the high priest in the Day of Atonement, where he has to bathe after leaving the Holy of Holies. The bathing twice before and after the ritual frame the ritual activity. The same applies for the two men who send away the goat to Azazel and the one who takes the chatat ox outside of the camp. Both must bathe after their activity. I suggest that the bathing indicates the borders of the ritual's activity. For my presentation today, I choose a few Hittite texts that I hope will help us to see the comparison. And I will try to show the Hittite texts as much as I can. CTH 486 is a text which seems to be told by the king himself. This is Moshili II, and he's describing how he has to atone for an unknown sin pointed to him through a thunder or lightning that caused him speech problems, so that he was unable to speak for a while. Although it had passed, he kept dreaming of it, and the oracular inquiry about it demanded atonement via a ritual, including a substitute ox, which was sent to the temple of the storm god of Manutzia in the land of Kumani, where the storm seems to happen. The description regarding the purification goes as follows. The substitute ox was decorated. His Majesty put his hand on it. He was sent to the land of Kumani. The Majesty bowed down, but on that day they adorned the substitute ox. On that day His Majesty washed. Earlier during that night he stayed away from a woman, but as soon as he washed himself the next morning, he likewise laid hands on the substitute ox. But as soon as the substitute ox was sent, the Majesty washes himself in a Cultic manner. Shupa wapti. So how should we translate it as a question? For 7 days after the departure of the substitute ox. But as soon as one brought the substitute ox to Kumani, and as one sent it, the Majesty did not linger. He spent exactly 7 days in washing himself. The next paragraph relates to the clothing of the king. But on the day I gave the substitute ox to the sun god, as soon as they sent it, they sent with it the splendor robes which I, my Majesty, wore on that day. Those splendid robes all together, together with a belt to insert a dagger and shoes with the armament, and sent it away. The harnessed chariot, together with bow, quiver, and horses, they dispatched and drove them. The clothes of the king are sent as part of this atonement. The clothes worn on the day it occurred are included as if they also carry some kind of sin that has to be cleared from the king's surroundings. But this act is compared with the biblical high priest taking off his clothes as he finishes his activity in the Holy of Holies, leaving them there and dressing in his regular attire. Then the clothes worn by the king on the day of the thunder came in contact with the divine, that is, with the holiness, and as such are sent back to the God. Now, why does he have to wash in an act of consecration wash while he remains in his palace? Probably or possibly the substitute ox is sent instead of the king. As long as the ox is alive on the way, the king is in danger. So he is acting to protect himself. Another possibility is to compare it with the 7 days of purification that is prescribed in different cases in Leviticus. The second text that I wish to present, I still have some time, is also relating to a prayer, and described the ritual that is taken by a priest before going to the prayer. These are the words of the priest of the sun goddess of Arena: in the dark of a day which is fair and there is no cloud, on that day I order my servant. I am going to the sacred Salimani, some kind of a construction, and as soon as I washed myself, give me my festive garment right away. Furthermore, it should be ordered: nobody should bow down and nobody should say anything. When it gets light at daybreak, my servant goes down and brings up pure water with a jug. He puts it before the altar, and he places 3 sacrificial thin breads behind the altar. I step before the altar and libate 3 times from the jug before the altar. The deity washes its hands thoroughly, and I wash my hands. A priestly ritual that uses the washing twice, once bathing, and the second time washing the statue, and last the hands of the priest. I will go to the third text. This one suggests a legal prescription to temple personnel, and they have, I will not read it because there's not enough time. They have to wash generally before they even start getting into the temple, before they start doing any activity that will bring them in contact with the gods. And I will read only the second. And you must be washed, wear clean clothes, and also let your hair and fingernails be taken, so that the spirit of the gods is not displeased with you. In the fourth text, I will read only the beginning. It's a preparation for a festival, and it goes like that. On the previous day, the horned headgear, Sangha priest, the Tacheli priest, the Chamena men, the Gudu priest, and the temple men all wash themselves. Then the deities' statues too they wash. The temples of the deities they sweep and they sprinkle. When it dawns, the horned headgear, Sangha priest, the Tacheli priest, the Chamena men, and the Gudu priest, and the temple men all go up to the temple. So physically cleanliness is thus a prerequisite for different ritual activities, mainly when confronting the divine entities, usually in the context of a sacred place. The washing within the boundaries of the ritual indicated in the above cases divide the rituals into stages. A starting point of the ritual, the peak of the ritual with the next washing, like the washing of the hands of the deity statue, or the state of the danger when the king is keeping bathing for 7 days, and then the end of the ritual, which sometimes require another washing. As I said at the beginning of my talk, today's presentation was an initial observation of texts and terms in the 2 cultures, which I hope to study and develop further. Thank you very much.